A fantastic 70.3 nutrition plan can mean the difference between cruising to a PB or walking the final 10K. Let's break down exactly how to avoid that second scenario. If you're new here, then hey, my name's James and I'm a registered sports and exercise nutritionist. I work with amateur and pro triathletes to help them take the guesswork out of nutrition so they can train, recover, and race faster. Today, we're breaking down your complete nutrition plan for a 70.3 triathlon. So that includes what to eat before the race, how to fuel on the bike and run, and how to hydrate properly. So whether you're chasing a PB or just want to avoid crawling through the half marathon, this video will give you a clear strategy that works in the real world. Let's start with some quick science, because once you understand the why, everything else becomes easier to apply. In a 70.3, your body uses both fat and carbohydrates for fuel. Fat stores are essentially unlimited, but carbs are the rocket fuel that actually push performance. But here's where the nutrition conundrum starts. Even if you're fully loaded up on carbs, most athletes only have about 90 minutes worth of carbohydrate energy stored as something called glycogen in your liver and your muscles. If you don't consume any extra carbs, then you get into bonking territory, otherwise known as hitting the wall, and watching your pace fall off a cliff. This is why carbohydrate intake during racing matters so much. It's not just about eating when you feel like it. It's about supplying your body in advance with the energy that it needs to continue at the right pace. Protein and fat are poor short-term fuels and harder to digest mid-race, so we lean heavily on fast-absorbing carbs and fluid designed for performance. One of the most overlooked areas of 70.3 prep is carb loading. Plenty of triathletes think a big bowl of pasta the night before is enough. Spoiler alert, it's not. And honestly, I can't tell you how many triathletes who I've worked with who, when we've looked through their carb loading plan, it is just a little bit of extra carbs the day before, and that is not going to cut the mustard. To truly top up your glycogen stores, you need 36 to 48 hours of structured, high carb eating, so 8 to 12 grams of carbs per kilo of body weight per day. And that is more than most people realize. And without fail, every time I talk to clients about how much food they really need to eat, they are so surprised by how much they actually need to get down them. So here's how to make this work. Start 36 to 48 hours before your race start. Prioritize low fiber, low fat, and low to moderate protein foods. Front load calories earlier in the day. Keep training light or skip it altogether. Stay hydrated, ideally with sodium in your fluids during the carb loading period. And perhaps most importantly, follow a plan. Most failed carb loads happen because triathletes just wing it. If you do that, you'll miss your target and risk the good old dreaded bonk on race day. I've linked a video at the end of this one that gives you way more info on how to successfully carb load for 70.3, so make sure you check that out. Breakfast matters, not as the primary fuel source as many think, because that's your carb load and in-race nutrition, but to help maintain liver glycogen and keep you feeling sharp. Go with a medium-sized portion of a familiar meal that's high in carbs, low in fat, fiber, and easy to eat early in the morning. Ideally, this is something that you've practiced repeatedly in training and know that you tolerate well and are happy to eat in those ungodly hours of the morning. So that might be things like rice pudding and jam, honey on toast, rice with maple syrup, or if you do okay with them, overnight oats or oatmeal. I'd aim for a minimum of 1 gram of carbs per kilo of body weight. So for me, that's about 70 grams of carbs, which would be the equivalent of a couple of largish pieces of toast plus some honey. This shouldn't include full-fat dairy and very minimal in the way of nuts and seeds. And if you're someone who struggles with eating early in the morning due to just the time itself, or something like race nerves, even liquid fuel is perfectly fine here if you're hitting those guidelines. I normally advise drinking a pint of water with your breakfast as well, which includes 750 milligrams of sodium. And if you do that, you are onto a winner. In most scenarios, I'd recommend having a gel 10 to 15 minutes before your swim. Like with most things race day, We want simple, easy to digest carbohydrates here. So a gel is a great option. Quick to absorb, easy on the stomach, and gets your body primed for the race. Aim for 30 to 60 grams of carbs, and if you want to, you can include a caffeine gel here. Make sure that this is something that you practiced in training and you know you tolerate it well before swimming. There are two key principles to understand with your race nutrition. The first is that the longer you race, the more nutrition you need. The second is that the higher intensity, the less your gut can handle. That's the balancing act, getting in enough carbs and fluid without upsetting your stomach. So with that said, let's talk about fueling on the bike. I would normally suggest triathletes have a gel in T1 because for most people, having that fueling going in early just makes sense and it reduces you having to faff around once you're on the bike. A gel is a great option because it's so simple and it only takes a moment to slurp down. After that, you want to start taking on nutrition about 15 to 20 minutes into the bike leg. This is just enough time to settle into your rhythm and let your tummy settle as well after the swim. Most triathletes should aim for at least 60 grams of carbs per hour during the bike, using products with a mix of glucose and fructose to maximize absorption. We know from the studies that a mix of the two is beneficial because it allows you to absorb and use more carbs, so don't go for options that are just glucose or maltodextrin on their own without fructose. Use a setup that works for you, whether that's drinks, gels, chews, or a mix. I'd avoid using solid food because it's more likely to upset your stomach and it takes longer to digest. You can separate your hydration and carbs or combine them, but whichever you choose, make sure it's dialed in and tested and that you've accounted for race day conditions like if it's particularly hot or cold. So one of the things to highlight here is that many triathletes' fluid intake will drop if it's not particularly warm on the bike. So if you're relying on carb intake through fluid and your intake drops, you'll drop your carb intake as well, which could be a big problem later on in the race. So this is something you need to bear in mind. Practice lots in training to find the strategy that works well for you and keep refining it until you're super comfortable with it and you know how to alter it if needed. The bike is also prime time for hydration. 500 ml of fluid per hour is a solid starting point and your fluid should include sodium. So 500 milligrams of sodium per liter of fluid is the minimum that I'd want to see, but usually around 1000 milligrams of sodium per liter of fluid is the ideal. You might need more if you're a heavy sweater, but it puts you into a good ballpark. When you get your fluids, sodium, and carbohydrates correct on the bike, you're leveraging the most influential part of your race, and you can really perform to the best of your ability. Now, speaking of getting the most out of your bike leg, not just through nutrition, but by gaining extra speed, this is a great time to introduce today's sponsor, Easy Gains. You probably know I don't work with nutrition companies. I want to keep my advice unbiased, but I do partner with brands solving real performance problems, and Easy Gains is one of them. Their Easy Disc Super Light is one of the most cost-effective upgrades in triathlon. It fits over your existing rear wheel to reduce drag, no matter your speed or the course profile. Flat, hilly, it doesn't matter. Less drag means faster times. It was easy to install. I followed their video and I didn't have any issues. And if you're a data nerd like me, you should check out their wind tunnel testing on their science page. They've shown results comparable to much pricier disc wheels. And you can get 10% off with the code NutritionTriathlon using the link in the description or comment section of this video. So now you're on the run course, which means your nutrition strategy can change a little bit. I actively encourage triathletes to drop their carb targets slightly here, aiming for about 50 grams of carbohydrates per hour. Your gut is more sensitive now. You're hotter, you're tired, you're more dehydrated, and you're running. All of that affects absorption. Stick with the products that you know, whether that's your own nutrition or if you're using on-course nutrition and have practiced it. GI issues on the run are brutal, but if you've followed the advice so far in training and then in racing, you should be in a really good spot. Run hydration can be lighter. So 300 to 400 mils per hour is a good benchmark for most triathletes here. So in practical terms, that means 2 to 3 aid station cups per hour will usually do it, but you can drink more and drink to thirst if you want to. If you've pre-hydrated well and kept up your sodium intake on the bike, then water is fine here. But the caveat is that if it is a particularly hot day or you're a very heavy salty sweater, then you might benefit from some sodium in the first hour or so of the run. And you could get that in however works best for you. So whether that's you carrying an electrolyte drink with sodium or using something like sodium capsules, it really just depends on your preferences. Now, caffeine can improve performance by reducing perceived exertion, as well as improving alertness. The sweet spot for caffeine is 3 to 6 milligrams of caffeine per kilo of body weight, which means for me at 70 kilos, I'd need 210 to 420 milligrams of caffeine to get the most benefit. My normal strategy is a good hit of caffeine with breakfast to get your caffeine levels up, then 100 milligrams before the start, another 100 milligrams somewhere towards the end of the bike or the start of the run. This should keep your caffeine levels in what we call the therapeutic range, and it should be a great spot to balance the sensitive line of performance without overdoing the caffeine. Just make sure that you practiced it in training and that you're not trying it for the first time during racing. Caffeine can have some unpleasant symptoms, and it might mean a few toilet trips if you're not used to it. Let's wrap this up with a few post-race tips, because recovery matters if you want to bounce back well and enjoy your brilliant achievement. There's an easy way to do this, and that is with the 4 R's. Refuel with 1 gram of carbs per kilo of body weight. So sweets, drinks, white bread, anything that's easy to absorb. Repair with at least 25 grams of protein. Protein powder, milk, a smoothie, or something else that you've prepared and know that you'll want to eat immediately after the race. Rehydrate with 500 mils of fluid per hour and include at least 250 milligrams of sodium in that fluid, and then scale both of these up in the same ratio if you feel you need to drink more. After a couple of hours of following this approach, you can then drop to drinking to thirst. Rest. Take it easy. Recovery is just as important as the race, so don't try returning to training, especially hard training, too soon. A 70.3 is long enough that nutrition can make or break your day. But the good news is, it's completely in your control. Get your carb loading right, fuel early and consistently, practice everything, and trust your plan when the gun goes off. I mentioned that carb loading can be a minefield, and if you're interested in the specifics of it, then you can check out this video here to make sure that you follow a proper plan and get the real performance benefits.